So the good thing about Amazon is if they like you as a candidate, they will find a place for you anywhere in the world in the organization. So a lot of times a candidate may be a good candidate, but may not be a right fit for that specific role. So a lot of companies in Europe are hiring globally. They're just looking for the right kind of talent. So they are providing immigration services, visa services similar to Amazon.
Hello guys, welcome again. In this podcast session, my special guest Faryal will talk that bases her personal experience how to land a job in Europe from your home country. For instance, in case of Faryal, she landed her dream job in Amazon Luxembourg while she was living and working in Pakistan. So she will talk or take us through her experience and how others can follow suit. Now, before we go into the topic, a little bit about Faryal. She's from Pakistan, where she studied electrical engineering from LUMS, then industrial engineering from North Carolina State University in USA. She has 9 years of experience in supply chain in multinationals and currently working in Amazon based out of Luxembourg. Now, we will have a separate podcast session with her where we will talk about, or she will share her experience as to how you can get paid to study in US for free and rather get paid to study in US. So an amazing experience that she's had, and she'll take us through that. Now, without further wait, let's dive into this topic of the podcast, which is how to land a job in Europe from your home country. So Faryal, over to you. Now, before I ask you specific questions about how did you manage to get a job in Europe from while you were in Pakistan, can you give us a little bit background or story about you? I did talk about what you've studied, but it would be nice to know a little bit more about you, and then we'll go into the specific topics.
Okay, so in terms of my background, I grew up in Quetta. And when you're a girl who's good at studies from Quetta, at least at my time, you had two career options if you wanted to be a career woman, either become a teacher or a doctor. So I always wanted to be a doctor when I was growing up, except when I moved to Islamabad for my A-levels, and I got to know that my class fellows and my friends were pursuing different careers. One of my friends wanted to be an industrial engineer. She ended up going to Canada to study that. Another one wanted to study economics. One of them wanted to study interior designing. One was studying business. That was the first time I realized I had other options as well. And I ended up choosing somehow electrical engineering. And I wanted to be a scientist. I still remember when I was interviewing for my undergrad university alums in Lahore for the electrical engineering program. I said that once I'm done with this program, I will go to do my PhD in digital signal processing. Like, that's how clear I was about becoming a scientist at that point in time. Except I never liked any of the streams in electrical engineering that much for me to commit to it for a career, for an academic career or otherwise research career associated with it. And digital signal processing was one of my least favorite subjects. So that meant that I had to pivot. And at that point in time, there were a lot of campus recruitment drives going on. So I thought I'll give industry a try. I had already given GRE before in my junior year, in my third year of my program, because I wanted to become a scientist. So I wanted to apply for grad schools and PhD programs. So it was in my final year when I was going through campus recruitment drives, and the Fulbright deadline came along, and I applied for the program. And while I was in my first year of my job at PepsiCo, is when I was going through the Fulbright shortlisting, interviewing, and all of that process. And within a year, once it was finalized, I quit and I moved to US for my master's.
Thank you, Faryal, for sharing that. Now, my next question is if you can share with us kind of the process you went through with regards to applying in Amazon in Luxembourg. And I would also like to understand, as you take us through the process, because I'm sure you applied a couple of years back, how much of that is also true now, or if anything has changed. So over to you.
All right. So in terms of Amazon jobs, so Amazon is a very, very global company, and there are a lot of of all my work experience so far has been in global organizations, but the way Amazon is really truly global, I don't think, at least in my experience, I have seen any other company global in that way. So that's number one. Number two, Amazon, at least until quite recently, was growing and expanding with a very, very high speed, which meant a lot of job opportunities were opening up. They're still opening up, but maybe not at that speed like 2 years ago or something. But so there are a lot of job opportunities opening up everywhere Amazon is expanding. That includes Europe, that includes Middle East, emerging countries like Australia, Brazil, everywhere Amazon is expanding. There are a lot of job opportunities opening up. And Amazon wants to hire the best candidates that they can find for that job. There are no restrictions when it comes to, from the company side, when it comes to hiring a candidate from anywhere in the world to any part of the world, except if there are any specific restrictions coming from that country where that job is located. So the good thing about Amazon is if they like you as a candidate, they will find a place for you anywhere in the world in the organization. So if you want to apply, irrespective of where you're from, if you have the experience and if you're a good candidate for a role, and if you think you're well suited for Amazon culture and you can perform, you should apply, and then the interview process and the shortlisting process follows.
So, do you know if Amazon is still hiring
Yes,
particularly in Europe?
yes.
Okay. And you can just apply online, and this is how you did. You just went online, applied, and your resume gets shortlisted, or did you go through any networking, or so what was the process of applying?
So I think there are multiple ways of applying. You can apply online. You can ask an existing employee to refer you. But when an existing employee is referring you, they have to specify whether they personally know you and they can vouch for your work ethic, etc., or if you're just an acquaintance. So if you know somebody who's your ex-colleague or who you've worked with in some capacity before who can vouch for you, that's one option to get a referral. I think that's a better way, but the other option is just to apply online. But there are other ways as well. I've heard people who have been reached out by recruitment team at Amazon or some headhunters, or they've gone to these career fairs and etc. and stumbled upon on an opportunity there. So there are multiple ways. But as far as I'm concerned, I applied online. Yes.
Got it. You mentioned Amazon is a global company, and I know that as well. It's we all know that. But why only did you apply in Europe? Why not in US, let's say? So why specifically Europe that you applied for?
So at the time when I was applying, I basically just looked for a few roles that were in line with what I wanted to do. It just so happened that those roles were open in Europe. That was the first thing. Secondly, I also knew that they were hiring extensively in Europe, UK region versus US, for example. So that was also another reason. But primarily, the first reason is like the heavier reason for me for applying to Amazon. I didn't apply to Luxembourg specifically. I applied for a position that was based out of UK.
And then they moved you to Luxembourg?
Yeah. So then what happened was the interview process started. The first step is a screening interview where the recruitment team or the recruitment officer interviews you. It's like a basic screening interview, and then they recommend you for that role that you've applied for, and then the hiring manager of that role interviews you. And when the hiring manager interviewed me, they referred me to a more senior central European headquarter level role, which was based out of Luxembourg. So then the recruitment team, they got in touch with me and they asked me if I was interested in an opportunity based out of Luxembourg, or I was inflexible and I wanted to go for the same role that I had applied for. or something similar in UK. And I said I'm open as long as it's in this region. I don't mind, as long as it's within procurement. Because for me, the role that I had applied for was procurement, and that's how I was then interviewed for the role that was based out of Luxembourg.
Got it. And any visa challenges that you had, any work visa related issues or complexities that are there?
Yeah, of course. I think when I applied, it was also during the COVID time. So, in general, because of COVID, everything had slowed down a lot. So, it took forever for any of the documents to come in. So, there's a long process, right? You accept a job, then um, a company gets in touch with you who takes care of the entire visa process. They applies for work authorization at Luxembourg on your behalf. When you get the work authorization, then they apply for a long-term visit visa, something like that, for Europe, and that's so you have to get the visa and the work authorization, and then you can come here. So for me, all of that took way above the standard lead times, um, primarily because of COVID, and there were some hiccups that came in because some of the applications were not filed correctly by the agents, etc. So there were some rejections in between and reapplications, etc. So for me, it was quite a bit of a challenge. But I would expect that for Pakistan in general, maybe not, it shouldn't take as long as it did for me, but it should still take quite a bit of time because there are a lot of things that need to be cross-checked and verified and validated, and all of that takes some time. But if I talk about overall time, I think I accepted the job offer on 1st or 2nd of June, and I was in Luxembourg mid of November. So 5.5 months or 6.5.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. So I'm not sure if you can answer the next question that I have in full, but I'll still pose that question because maybe out of some friends or hearsay, or just because you are more aware than me. So how do you compare the visa process in Europe or Luxembourg versus the H1B in US? And why I ask this question is because H1B in US is a lottery system and it is a hit or miss. So in terms of ease, if you know the answer, given people who worked and who moved abroad in US as well, in Europe as well, you moved to Europe, so I'm sure you know people working in Amazon US as well. How easy would you qualify moving to Europe or Luxembourg Amazon would be versus moving to US Amazon? If you were reapplying all over again and you had these two options, let's say.
So it depends. So if I have to compare, if I'm applying from Pakistan directly to US, I think it's not just about the visa process. I am probably competing with all the Pakistanis that are already in the US applying for Amazon, who might be more preferred candidates than me. So I think you have to look at the complete picture. I'm not sure. Like these are just these are based on my experiences and my opinions specifically, but that's how I would see it. So that's number one. Number two, I don't necessarily know the overall process for H1B in that level of detail, but I know that in Luxembourg, for example, you get, or in Europe in general, anywhere in Europe, you get the work authorization, you come here on blue card, and then as long as you have a job, you don't have to worry about anything visa related. And then depending on which country you're at, within a certain number of years, you can, if you learn the language, you can apply for the citizenship. So for example, for Luxembourg, it's 5 years, I believe, and you have to learn Luxembourgish for that. If I compare that to H1B, I think H1B worst case scenario will be way longer and way worse. I would not way worse, but like way longer and a lot difficult. So yeah, like that's how I see it. I see it's probably easier to manage in Europe in general compared to US, at least in today's climate.
I would have guessed the same. So thank you. Now let's move more and focus more on Amazon itself. Can you share with us any do's and don'ts? So let's say I'm in Pakistan, I'm a fresher, came out of college, or maybe I have some experience under my belt, couple of years, and I want to apply for Amazon. I go online, I apply. But what are the do's and don'ts, if any, that I need to know or be aware of as I go through my preparation for the Amazon hiring process?
I think if I have to give advice to anybody, I would just say that be authentic. As far as the do's are concerned, I would say be authentic. Um, when you're shortlisted for an interview, everybody at Amazon involved in that process, from the recruitment officer to the hiring manager, everybody wants you to get shortlisted. They are actually rooting for you. So they give you all the advice, they send you in what format you have to answer the questions, what are the Amazon leadership principles that you should refer to. All of that comes as an email that you use to prepare for that interview. So everybody's really trying to help you. And now it just comes down to you being your authentic self and talking about all the work that you've done. Because through that interview, the interviewer is trying to assess two things primarily. One, if you're the right fit for Amazon culture, and two, whether you're the right fit for that role that you're applying for. So a lot of times, a candidate may be a good candidate, but may not be a right fit for that specific role. So you do get an inclined rating, but you might not be the perfect candidate for that specific role, because they're very specific type of candidates that a hiring manager is looking for when they have a role advertised.
Got it. And if, with regards to preparation itself, do I spend some time, like I know there are a lot of resources online, so, but how did you, let's say, go about preparing yourself for the hiring process, for the interview process?
Yeah, so it's very standard, to be very honest. It's just a bit longer than other organizations. So all the organizations that I've worked for, all the multinationals, FMCGs, etc., everybody has a behavioral interview questions format. Pretty much standard. The same is the case with Amazon. Every company has their own version of leadership principles. Some company will call it objectives, somebody will call it goals, somebody will call it leadership principles, etc. And every company has its questions around those leadership principles. So same is the case with Amazon. We have leadership principles. They are explained in quite a bit of detail on Amazon website. And we tell the candidates that these are the leadership principles that we will be referring to when we're going to ask questions. Please answer in the STAR format, which is situation, task, action, result format, where you talk about the situation, so you build the context. Then you talk about the task, what was exactly your role there, what was the task at hand, and then actions, what was your role, what actions did you take, and as a result of your actions, what exactly happened, what were the benefits, etc. So you have to answer in STAR format. So leadership principles, behavioral questions, STAR format. So if you're talking about interview preparation, I think I would this is what I did and this is what I'd recommend everybody to do. Just go over your resume. Make sure that you have all the information readily available with you. Sometimes there's some numbers, etc., that you forget. So make sure you have all of those readily available with you, and some important projects that stood out for you. Make sure that you have all the information at the top of your mind for those projects, because some of those experiences may be like 2 years old, 3 years old. You might not have those memories fresh in your head. So just refresh your memory, get all the information, and look at your leadership principles. Try to identify what leadership principle each example can connect with, and go into the interview. Because when you're being interviewed, you can't tell what leadership principle is being assessed, because when they're asking a question, they're not saying that, now I'm going to talk about deliver results. So that's not how the interview happens. So it's not for you to decide which leadership principle they're trying to assess. You just go in there, you talk about your project, and you answer the question. And if you're authentic, if you've done good work, if you're a competent candidate, I don't see any problem why it wouldn't happen for you.
Got it, clear. Thank you. One question which usually gets asked, because I post a lot of videos around interview hiring, not for Amazon, but generally speaking, I have a couple of them on Amazon as well. Um, are there any technical questions that they ask in the interview? Let's say your background is supply chain. So, were there any questions related to what is DSO, what is inventory return, or safety
I
stock, or
wouldn't.
something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, so I don't think because when you're interviewing an experienced candidate, I think these are two basic questions. So nobody ever asked me these questions. I wouldn't ask these questions for if I'm interviewing somebody for a role similar to mine, because we need experienced candidates for these kind of roles. So the questions could get a little bit technical. So I'm in procurement. So from procurement angle, it could get a little bit technical if somebody from procurement is interviewing you, but it's not like really like technical. It's procurement technical. For Amazon technical interviews, those are specifically for STEs or software engineers or like other organizations within Amazon, where we have separate technical interviews, and their format and their process is a little bit different from these non-tech interviews. So I'm in a non-tech role. I interviewed for a non-tech role, and when I'm interviewing, I'm also taking interviews for non-tech roles. So whatever information I'm giving is primarily for non-tech roles.
Correct. This helps and clarifies. Thank you. Are there any online tests before you go for the interview process, or none at all, or it depends which role are you applying for?
It depends on the role. For procurement, the role that I applied for, I think there was some kind of online assessment, which I don't remember now, but I think it's for an IQ assessment, probably something like that. And if you're applying for a relatively senior role, they might also ask you to write, because in Amazon we don't do PowerPoint presentations, we do documents. So they want to assess your writing skills. So you might have to write something for assessment purpose. So that could be something as well. Other than that, I don't remember, but yeah, but there are online assessments, but that really depends on the role that you're applying for. And if your role requires some kind of data analysis and stuff, or some kind of language that you need to know, computing language, then there might be some online assessments related to that too. So it really depends on the role that you're applying for and the seniority of the role that you're applying for.
Got it. So you haven't made a PowerPoint presentation since you joined Amazon, or have you?
No, I
Really?
haven't, and yeah,
Wow.
and I love it. I'm a very detail-oriented person. The level of information I would like to talk about when I'm discussing a project or presenting a project, a PowerPoint presentation is never enough for that. So I'm so happy that I'm writing documents. I don't miss PowerPoint at all.
Nice. You know what? We should have another podcast on writing documents. It was big when I was in Procter and Gamble. One pager was a big thing, but I've heard Amazon has just taken it to another level. So I would love to
Yeah,
learn from you, and maybe others can benefit as well. This experience that you've learned at Amazon on writing, because I'll tell you what. When I was in university, in college, the more you write, the better the project. So if someone writes 10 pages, I write 5, the person who's written 10 pages may get more points than me. And suddenly
yeah,
life changed for me when I joined Procter and Gamble, because if you exceed more than one page, they go like, you're not clear in your head. Now I'm sure Amazon won't be one page, because since you don't have PowerPoint at all, it would be more than one
yeah.
page. But it would be in a different way. So anyways, not for this podcast, but I would really love to learn what you've learned, and maybe you can teach me something on writing.
Sure.
Last question, or moving towards the last question, is: are there other companies you know of in Europe, in your circle, who are also hiring as much as Amazon does in Europe, or none?
Yes. So a lot of companies in Europe are hiring globally. They're just looking for the right kind of talent. So they are providing immigration services, visa services similar to Amazon. But whether they're hiring as extensively as Amazon, I can't say, but I know they're hiring. Maybe not as extensively. I know that, for example, in Luxembourg, we have the big four, the finance consulting firms. They're always hiring. So I meet people from all over the world who have been recently hired and moved to Luxembourg for roles in finance. I also know a lot of people from data analysis and software engineering background who get hired at different companies here. Recently, a friend of mine got an offer from a company based in Berlin, and she's moving from Pakistan to Berlin for that role. She comes from a data analysis background. So yeah, a lot of companies are hiring all over the Europe. They're giving immigration services, visa services. What it comes down to is whether you're the right candidate or not, and how to assess if you're a right candidate is whether you have the kind of experience they're looking for, because most of the times they're looking for experienced candidates. So the experience matters a lot, and as a result of this experience, what skill set you've developed, that matters a lot. So there's certain skills that they're looking for at the time of hiring. There's certain skills that they know you will develop as part of the job. But there's certain skills that are non-negotiable, that you need to have some experience that you need to have. So if you have all of that, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be hired.
Got it. Okay, so my last question, which is, you also have an international degree. Did that play a role as well? And the reason I ask is, let's say I'm from Pakistan, I don't have that international degree on my resume. So does that mean I stand less of a chance versus you? Or to ask it differently, okay. Or to ask it differently, which is, do you know of anyone who's gotten or moved to Europe without having that on their resume and still were able to do it the way you did it?
Yeah. So I think this basically, whether you have a degree from abroad or not, really doesn't matter so much in terms of your profile or your checklist. Like if there is a specific requirement for a certain degree, only then it could potentially be a mandatory requirement, which I have never seen in my personal experience. But what this degree really brings to the table with somebody who doesn't have this degree is probably some level of confidence, some level of networking, some level of just the comfort of having lived abroad, what it's like. There are other things, other benefits that come with this degree, which somebody who doesn't have it may not have. Having said that, that doesn't mean you cannot interview. That doesn't mean you will not be shortlisted or not get a job. I know people who have gotten a job without a degree from abroad, with local Pakistani university degrees, but then the profiles have to be competitive. Like they're really strong profiles. So at the end of the day, it really what matters is your profile and your experience.
Cool. Thank you, Faryal. So that's all. One last question I usually ask my guest is, where can people connect with you, primarily on social media, or reach out to you? So do you have a preferred handle that I can leave in the description of this video?
Yes, I would. My preferred place for people who want to reach out to me would be LinkedIn. But I would recommend people that are planning to reach out to me to come to me with specific questions that they cannot find answers for elsewhere on the internet. And that I feel answering to your questions is a good utilization of my time as well. So that will be my only recommendation. Other than that, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn.
Cool. Thank you, Faryal. Thanks for your time, and thanks for accepting to come on this on the podcast and sharing your experience and all the learnings. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.